Hi everyone, Barbara Rankin here today with another video tutorial for ColourArte. Today I'll be playing with my twinks, also known as Twinkling H20s. I'll be starting off with some mixed media paper from Strathmore, cut to 6 inches by 4 3/8 inch, so that it will fit inside this embossing folder from Sizzix. It is called Flowers, Leaves, and Twist Ornate Large. I've already run it through my Big Shot. Here's a close-up. In order to keep the embossing detail, turn it over to the debossed or indented side and spread a coat of light molding paste into the indentations. This will help the paper hold the embossing even when applying wet media on the front side, which we'll be doing with our watercolors. Now, the reason I like to use light molding paste for this is simply because it dries quickly. However, you can use whatever you have on hand, whether it is heavier molding paste, thick gel medium, or even spackling paste from the hardware store. They will all work just fine, so use what you have. Okay, while my molding paste is drying, I'm going to set it aside here for a moment. And I'm going to start to activate my Twinkling H20s. And the way I like to do it is I just have a bottle of water. I put art water on here so I don't accidentally drink it, because who knows how long this has been sitting here. But anyway, I like to use a pipette. You can certainly use a spray bottle or a dripper bottle, one like this only filled with water. But I'm going to use a pipette. I have more control. And so I'm just going to pull up some water and drop a few drops into each little container. And you'll want to let it sit for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. The longer it sits, the more of the Twinkling H20s you'll activate. And you can go from a very watered down version. If you take paint out, if you take some of the twinks out now, your mixture will be very watered down. But if you wait, it will get very thick and creamy. And the way you would water it down then is just use a wet paintbrush. So we're going to set this aside and wait 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, my molding paste is dry, my twinks are activated, so I'm going to flip this over to the embossed side, and I'm just going to start adding color. And I'm going to wet my brush. I've got a number 10 round brush here, and just start, and you can see how creamy this is now that it's been sitting here. You can really get some nice color on your brush. I did not prime this, so this is probably going to absorb in places, but we'll see what happens. I'm a little curious, actually. And you can see just how much pigment there is here. And I want to kind of mix things up a bit. And I do have a little mini mister here, and I filled it with water. And I like using these because they do put out a real fine mist. So they don't like oversaturate everything, but they do give you enough moisture to help things move around without just saturating your paper completely. But you can add water either by misting it or by adding it with your brush. You can also add water to your paper before you add the watercolor. So I can see I can add more here, and it will just kind of work its way around. I like using both colors. They're kind of pretty together. Looks like I've got a warm and a cool here. And so, let's see, I'll try some of this pink here and see what we get. Of course, we're going to get some purple from that. The only way I'll be able to maintain that pink color is if I let it dry and then add add the pink later. So I think I just might do that because I do want to keep a pink, more of a pink color. I'm just going to continue adding the 2 blue colors for now. And as needed, I will either mist the background or add more water by dipping my brush into the water pot and adding it that way. I'm also using the heat tool to help dry the paint when I like it, and this enables me to see where more color may need to be added. It also stops the twinks from continuing to run so much while I add more to the background. You can also add color by dragging your paintbrush along the edge and letting the color run down the paper or along the side edge to give it a different direction to run. Continue to mist and dry it as needed to get the results you like. So my twinks are dry, and I found 2 pieces of cardstock that I think these colors will go very nicely. I always like to use my lightest color for the base card, simply because when you open it, you can write inside of it without using some kind of special pen. And then the darker color always seems to be that shading color that brings everything to the center. So that's why I choose to do it. So it'll be something along this line with my edges. So I'll go ahead and cut the cardstock to size. For measurements, you can find them in the supply list below the video and also on my blog. Okay, so I went to my paper trimmer and I trimmed my base card from the light blue to 6.5 high by 9 3/4 inches across. And then if you score it at 4 7/8, you'll be able to fold it in half to make a 6.5 by 4 7/8 inch card. The dark blue was trimmed down 1/8 inch smaller, which measures 6 1/4 inches high by 4 5/8 across. The print, actually our mixed media piece of paper that we embossed, is going to measure just slightly smaller than the previous at 6 inches high by 4 3/8 inch across. So I'm just going to sit those aside for now because I want to stamp some images and color those in. So let me come back to that. Here's a quick tip. If your piece seems to buckle and curl, realign it inside the embossing folder and run it through your die cut machine again. Your paper will be perfectly straight and the embossing will be enhanced or rejuvenated. Also, even though I had the molding paste on the back, the embossing folder even re-embossed through the paper and the paste, and it is really solid now. So I'm going to stamp some images for my card front. I have a half of a sheet of this Express It blending cardstock. You can get this online, but let me show you how beautifully it stamps. And these stamps are by my friend Pam Bray. This is one of her newest lines. One is called Flamingo Row and the other is called Tropical Dreams. And they are so nicely, they're made by Blank Page Muse, and they're so nicely and deeply etched red rubber. I mean, it's really nice and thick red rubber that you don't really even need to put these on a cushion. I have 2 ways you can do it. I have an acrylic block, and when you don't have the cushion put on the stamp itself, you can put this, this is poster tape from Scotch, and I keep the protective paper on top of it when I'm storing it, but you can just lay it on there and it's not going anywhere, but yet it comes off very easily. The other way is to use this product from, I believe it's Tsukineko, and it's called Tack something, right now it's lost a lot of its tackiness, but it's one of those kind of adhesives that once you clean all the dirt and grime off of it, it gets sticky again. You see how here it's not so sticky, and here my finger's really sticking to it. So I do keep a piece of acetate film over. I know you can't see that, but I keep a piece of acetate film over it to keep it protected. But this you can also use. Once you put it on a block, though, it's on your block forever, unless you take it off and probably ruin the tack it stuff. But this is good for some stamps that just simply won't stick where you want them. And I'm going to put, and see now that sticks on there. What I want to do is stamp some of these images so that I can watercolor them. And for that I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This is a fade resistant dye ink, but it does dry water resistant, and it dries on almost all papers and surfaces. So, and it does give a really nice impression. But I want to show you how well these stamps stamp on here. I hardly have to use any pressure at all. You know how sometimes you just have to rock, you have to rock them and all, and perfect impression. So what I'd like to do, I like to stamp a couple of the original. I'm going to take this off just a moment so I can figure out what I have left, what area I have left. This guy is just a little bit too long, so I have to slant him, but that's okay. I'm going to be cutting him out. So I'm just putting a little bit of ink on this guy, this flamingo, and I'm going to stick him somewhere in here. Okay. And I'll set him aside. Now I want to make more of these flowers. I don't need any more flamingos, I just need the flowers and the leaves. So I'm going to put that back on here, and I'm going to just ink up. You don't have to be super careful if you get any on the flamingo's neck, because we are going to cut those out too. And I'm just going to ink those up and get several images of the flowers and the leaves, because I want to cut them out and do a little layering. So just continue to stamp as many images as you think you will need, as well as portions of any images you want to use for layering. Be sure to heat set the ink just to be sure it is dry before you add the Twinks watercolors. Okay, while my ink was drying, I went ahead and I activated a few more colors. This is Key Lime, Moss Green, Luv-U-Pink, Yellow Rose, and I also added African Jade just in case. So I've got some smaller little round brushes to play with here, and of course my flamingos are going to be pink. So I've got some Luv-U-Pink here. Since I'm going to cut these out, I don't really care if I go out of the lines. Matter of fact, it helps when you do cut out your paper. It sort of gives it an edge. Here's another quick tip. I wasn't sure how to color a flamingo, so all I did was Google flamingo images, and you get tons and tons of images of flamingos. Much to my surprise, I knew flamingos were pink, but what I didn't know was that their legs are not the typical orange or brown color that I'm used to using to color birds. They're actually a purpley pink. And in addition to that, their beaks are not that orange color. They are actually pink like their feathers with a little black tip. So continue coloring each image with the twinks, combining colors to make new colors, using a bit of water for lighter colors or less water for more intense colors. And like I said before, don't worry about staying inside the lines because we will be cutting each image out. Now I'm just going back over my colors, adding some depth and shading by adding a darker green to some of the leaves, a darker blue color to the centers of the flowers, or a darker pink or purple wherever it's needed. Like I said, you can do that either by increasing or decreasing the amount of water you use in your twinks, or by switching to a darker color. Once your images are dry, go ahead and start trimming out each piece. Okay, so all of my pieces are cut out, and I've got my layers ready to be adhered to the card. And for this card, I decided to use this little guy here, and I've just taken my fingers and sort of shaped up and down. You can trim out between the leaves or the flower petals if you need to. I think I got pretty good right there, but you just kind of want it to sit up. And I will be adhering these with foam dots. And so I have, let's see, here's another one I started playing with. And you just kind of want to pinch them, curl them with your fingers, do whatever it takes to make it look right to you. I think didn't want it to look too much the same. So, but however, I am going to be cutting a label, which I found this very old Cuttlebug cut emboss die, and it has the cutting and the embossing section all in one, and I used this one to cut out this label here. So I know that the label is going to go down right about here, so I have to put this up high enough for these to work. So the next thing I want to do is, okay, I think I'll use this stamp for my label. It says Love You. And since these aren't clear stamps, I'm going to need to use my stamp positioner to ensure I get this straight and centered on my die cut label. I'll be using the Memento black ink again. One more thing I want to do before I start putting things together is to shade the edges of my background paper with some Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide. I'm using an inking pod from Darice, but you can certainly use a makeup sponge or a blending tool for this. I'm also adding the same color to my label. This will give it some continuity. Now it's time to start assembling the card. I'm simply using some double-sided adhesive tape in a runner form to do this. I wanted to bring out the embossing a bit more, so I grabbed my Mystic Turquoise Antique Brilliance Wax and started applying it with a cotton swab, but ended up using my finger. It has a brown color to it, so it gave a more shaded appearance. I still like it though. I'm going to fast forward the video while I assemble the card. I'm using foam tape to adhere those pieces I want to give dimension to. I used my fingers to mold and shape individual pieces, sometimes scrunching and pinching the paper or cutting between petals to make it conform to whatever shape I wanted before adhering it with foam tape and glue. Between the colors of the twinks and the shapes of the flowers, this is looking to be a very beautiful bouquet. I love adding dimension to my flower centers too, so I usually turn to 3D paint in these little squeeze bottles to make little dots of color that will dry thick and round. Okay, so I've let all the paint dry, the three-dimensional paint, and the glue and everything is dry now, and I just wanted to show you how pretty this card is, how pretty it turned out. Everything has got nice dimension on it, as you can see, by just squeezing and pinching those flowers and by embossing the background and coloring with the beautiful ColourArte Twinkling H20s. So let's get started on our second card. Okay, for my second card, I wanted to show you that one of the things I did was I used some scraps of my mixed media paper, and I used this die cut again, but this time I cut this long rectangular tag, and for my background I embossed this floral embossing folder onto another piece of the media paper, and after I ran it through my embossing machine, I turned it over to the deboss side, and I again spread on some of the light molding paste into the debossed areas so that it would hold its shape. I also did it on this one little section of the debossed piece on the tag, just so it will hold its shape. And then, just to change it up, I covered both pieces on the front only with a coat of clear gesso. And what that will do, that primes your paper, and I'm thinking that it will allow me to um, have a little more movement and manipulate my colors as I add them. So let's see if we get if it's any different or not, and we'll get started. Okay, so like I said, I activated my twinks again, and I brought out this pretty color Bouganvillea because I wanted to bring some more purple in. And I think what I'll do first is I'm going to set the tag aside for the moment, and I'm just going to spritz the background with water, not a lot, and take my very large round brush, pick up some of this Bouganvillea, and I'll use a similar approach as before by adding the color, misting with water, and using the heat tool to dry the paint as needed and adding more as needed. So now I want to start adding some color to the embossed image areas only. And for that, I'm going to start out with the Beachhouse Blue Twinks and just add it to the floral portion of the embossing. Once you've finished painting the blue flowers, go ahead and use the moss green to paint the leaves and limbs. I accidentally forgot to turn on the recorder when I made this sweet little tag, but all I did was use my stamp positioner, as before, to make sure Flamingo Row would fit on the tag. Then I stamped it with Versamark ink and heat embossed it with magenta embossing powder. Now I'm just going to add a wash of African Jade Twinkling H20s to the background, just to take that bright white color away, and also make it look like it matches the paper better. I decided to lighten my background colors up a bit, so all I did was mist the background with water and use a damp baby wipe to pick up some of the extra color, and it also did pick up some of the blue color on the flowers. I'm going to assemble this card the same way as the previous one. It is identical in size with the exception of the colors. Now I do know I want to add my tag down at the bottom to cover that area where the embossing did not reach. But first I want to edge it with the Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide, but I'm going to do a very light touch. I'll go ahead and adhere the tag with some foam strips to give it height, and then I'll adhere a tiny flower over the tag hole, manipulating the flower as I did on the previous card. For this flamingo, I stamped him twice, using only the body for the top layer, which I adhered with foam dots. For this flower, I stamped each one twice. The bottom layer is left intact, but I cut the top layer apart so I could layer one flower on top of the base flowers, and one leaf was also cut apart to layer on top of the remaining leaf. I will have still photos at the end to help you see these better. And here I'm shaping and attaching that one last leaf to the remaining leaf. Okay, and I've got this teeny tiny little flower that I've prepared that I want to glue just to the tip of the tag there. Now I'm just stamping my phrase onto a piece of scrap blending card with the Memento black ink, and I'll dry it real well with my heat tool. Once the ink is dry, I can add a wash of African Jade Twinks over the stamped image. And then I will dry this again with a heat tool. Next, I grabbed my word window punch and punched out each line, which was then edged again with Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide. A strip of foam tape adhered to the back of each piece was then adhered to the card at an angle, as shown. As I looked at the card, I felt something was missing, so I grabbed the Luv-U-Pink Twinks and colored my Flamingo Row to finish it off. Ah, yes, that's exactly what was missing. Stick around for still photos and close-ups. For more inspiration, you can find me on these social media links. If you enjoyed today's project video, please give me a thumbs up, and I hope you will consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and always take time to play.